Hey guys, I'm Brent.
I'm Lila, and you can find us on the web at www.braintrustlive.com.
We
By
were
the time you
waiting.
listen to this, we might have a stimulus deal.
It was so funny. I was talking to a friend of mine who was like, "Oh, you're gonna have a lot to talk about on the podcast," in reference to like because we were talking about the stimulus deal, and I was like, "Actually, I feel like we covered all of the details in the stimulus bill last week, and they remain unchanged so far as I can tell. But they still haven't passed it because they're arguing about ridiculous minutia, which we'll get into what some of it is because some of it is like gonna like give you
Make
brain
your
cramps.
mind melt. Yeah.
Uh, yeah, but
That's
yeah, I
one thing we can be really thankful for is that the Progressive Caucus is really who was like, no, we have to have direct payments in here.
yeah.
And then there were a few Republicans that joined them. Like we said, Josh Hawley, for some reason, just like very into direct payments.
Mm-hmm.
But this was a policy that is only in this stimulus at all, although the amount is insulting, the work of people on the fringes, basically.
Yeah.
Moderate Democrats and moderate Republicans, if there is such a thing anymore, and also extremist Republicans, we're just happy to have no direct payments to anyone and have us all like starve to death in
Yeah.
January.
Yeah.
And it was the work of progressives and then some people on the far right as well who were just like, no, that's not, we
Yeah.
can't bring that back to our constituents.
Yeah.
They need money.
And if the
Um,
president would have taken a little bit more of an active role in this himself, then they probably would have been more than $600 because this has been like the one thing in 4 years
yeah,
that like he's been right about. I mean, this was
yeah.
sort of like
And he
his
was talking
idea.
about like $2,000
Yeah,
stimulus payments or something. I mean, he was
yeah,
before his own staff got back to him and was like, this makes the Republican line untenable, so don't
yeah,
say this. He was talking about much larger
right.
payments than even, Sanders has been talking about in general $2,000 a month
2000
payment.
a
But what
month,
he was
right?
asking for here was $1,200 payment, a
Mhm.
one-time $1,200 payment. And Trump was in there trying to come up with a $2,000 payment,
Right.
one-time payment.
Unfortunately, Trump is not doing anything other than worrying about overturning the election.
Right. Trump is being sad in his room these
Right.
days and is not doing much in the way of presidenting. And also, his staff talks him out of any good idea he might accidentally
Yeah.
have. So
Yeah.
there's plenty of lines to protect him from good ideas.
Yeah. But anyway, it looks like it's going to be a $900 billion deal. They have to vote on it by midnight tonight because they keep passing all of these like stopgap measures to keep the government open because they're trying to tie the stimulus deal to the overall government funding
Yeah, I
bill.
believe their last one just kept it open for the weekend.
Yeah, they did. They had to pass it. They had to pass one like a week and a half ago Friday, which lasted for a week, which got us to Friday, and everybody was thinking that they would have this solved by Friday, and then they still didn't. So they had to pass a 48-hour bill to keep the government open. So if they don't get it passed by tonight, then they are either going to the government will either shut down or they will have to pass another like 24-hour bill to like
That's,
be
I
able
would
to
not
do
be
this tomorrow.
shocked if they pass another short-term funding bill because they don't seem like they have their shit together.
Oh, I know.
And that's
Yeah,
the challenges to this keep coming from like this bill, this $900 billion deal. It has $600 one-time payments to people, which will arrive after Christmas, after they've starved to death at Christmas.
mm-hmm.
It will expand unemployment benefits $300 a week, which gets them just shy of what you need to pay the average rent, basically.
Yep.
And then it'll have some money for businesses and schools and other public institutions that are having economic issues.
Yeah.
But the holdup is the most insane thing anyone has ever heard of. It was liability protections. The new holdup is even more insane than that.
And
Oddly,
just completely offensive. And like, I can understand
way out
why
of left field too.
right, I know, and I can understand if you were like an actual like evil villain that this might be
Yes.
something that you would want to do. But to hold up the entire thing over this, basically what it is Pat Toomey specifically, but then like McConnell supported him and then like urged all of the other Republicans to support him, and they did enough, really. But it was they were trying to basically hamstring the Fed in the future over some of these like emergency programs that they had done that allowed them to like dole out loans to people and to banks so that they could get small businesses
And to
and things like
buy
that.
local government bonds, like to buy state and local
Right.
government bonds.
Exactly.
Like
They wanted to make sure that in the future the Fed could do none of those things.
Right. They
So
basically just wanted to make sure that Joe Biden's administration would have no ability to use the Fed in any way to do emergency economic relief
that would help
work.
America.
Right.
Yeah. So It was
Last
vindictive
people.
against the fact that Joe Biden won the presidency, vindictive against like literally the entirety of the American people,
Yeah.
because they were basically like being like, no, you can't get bailed out in any way in the future
Right.
by any of this money. So it was like, it was so
And these are the powers the Fed
crazy.
uses to help small, like little guys. So not just
Right.
like maybe we could stop bailing out the like entire industries
Well,
and banks and shit.
giant
But that's not
corporations.
what this was for. This was
No.
specifically the emergency powers the Fed uses to bail out regular people.
Yes. Yeah,
So,
small loans, mid-sized and small businesses, state and local governments. So they were just trying to get that stopped going forward.
so finally on Saturday, agreed to drop the broad language for that. So I think they have a compromise.
There's a compromise that I think like still makes it. My understanding is that like they can't have like the exact same programs without like a
Right.
reauthorization from Congress or something. So like it's like a weird thing where they can kind of still do it, but it has to not just be a re-extension of giving more money under like the current powers that they have or something. I don't necessarily fully understand it because it's some weird compromise that is probably like gets down to
it's a compromise with evil.
Yes.
Like it's a compromise with a bad idea.
Yeah.
It's like someone being like, we should murder all the penguins. And you're like, let's only murder half the penguins instead of exactly. Let's not even talk about penguin murder.
And that's the thing that is like crazy about this and also makes you sort of like mad at Democrats on this too, because AOC
sort of permanently.
AOC was tweeting about this earlier today because she was basically like, imagine like the fact that like Pat Toomey, who's like an asshole, came up with an asshole idea, and then immediately the entire party leadership got behind that idea and demanded that there be some sort of compromise on that. Like, imagine, like, Democrats don't do that. Like, they said that we're not going to do this without literally $2,000 a month, and we want it to be retroactive, and we want it to be $600 a month unemployment. Like, well, Bernie Sanders has been suggesting that, but like, instead of propping that up and making that like the party line and being like, look, we are not going to give you the votes for this. Like, they tell the people who come up with those ideas to like go and hide in the basement. Like,
meanwhile, they're like, we got to compromise with this crazy Pat Toomey idea that he just thought of on Friday.
Right, to fuck over the Biden administration.
Biden administration that has nothing to do with anything.
So you guys who want bigger direct payments, you just stay away right now. Mom and dad have got this. We're busy worrying about how to fuck over Joe Biden. Like, we got to do better.
It's wild also because the direct payments idea is the one thing that has bipartisan support and also is really easy to attack people over later. I heard a ton of stories around the election about people who only voted for Donald Trump because they got that $1,200 with his name on it. And that is a really effective political tool for both Republicans and Democrats. So they both should have an interest in sending us money. That's basically a tax cut. And don't they love tax cuts on the right, I thought?
I mean, talking about putting money in more than we should.
Yeah, I mean, that is literally a direct money transfer into people's pockets. And yet the fact that they couldn't get anyone on board because instead they were busy holding up liability protections for corporations, and this crazy pants Pat Toomey idea is just like the most insane thing I've ever heard. And also, I don't believe the negotiations would have had to go this way if the Democrats had said, okay, well, our hard and fast line is direct payments have to be a lot of fucking money.
Right.
We actually like all universally support these direct payments.
Yeah.
They were just like these loons on the left. By the way, if you are a person who doesn't, strictly speaking, need your direct payment, but wants to figure out what to do with it, I have been talking about this with my parents, and we all agreed that the thing that stimulus money is supposed to do is get money into the economy. So this is, if you donate money to anytime you want, whenever, but don't just think you have to donate this to alleviate the guilt of having it. Spend this money. If you can afford to spend this, use it at small businesses because they actually need your business right now. And a lot of the time, like for a lot of people, oftentimes shopping at small businesses is slightly more expensive. It can be a little bit more inconvenient. And so I think a lot of us, even when we do have the money, choose to shop on, with terrible corporations like Amazon because of the convenience and because things are cheaper. And it's not like everyone's rolling in money right now. But if you want to do the thing that you're supposed to do with this $600 and you don't like need it to eat, then spend it.
Yeah.
Spend it with people that need it to eat.
Yes, exactly.
People
Right.
need livings, and then you'll have done it. So there's like this sort of like liberal white guilt tendency to want to like feel like
Yeah.
you have to donate it to some sort to like, and then it gets
No.
donated to some
Donate
huge
it.
charity that uses it for overhead that doesn't
Yeah.
like
Donate
donate it
it to
to
the
a small
American
nonprofit
economy.
or donate it to the American economy.
Yeah.
In any case,
Yeah.
vaccines are happening.
They are. You had to.
And
I texted Lila at some point on either Monday or Tuesday, and I was like, "Look, as a person who I know hates needles, today is not a great news day for you."
it was a disaster. Everywhere you look, it's people getting shots. And I have like a slightly unreasonable phobia of needles that has nothing to do with reality. It's not something that I have like elected to have to have like my fillings done without Novocaine at times, which is insane to do just because shots make me that unhappy. Like I am a person who avoids shots in all contexts.
Mhm.
And I have actually two things that I want to say about this. One is I couldn't watch a lot of the news this week. The second is I need people to stop getting on Instagram and insisting that the shot didn't hurt. I get that we want to all look like this is wants us to believe that vaccines work, which is everyone who's being reasonable
Yes.
is getting out there and being like, it didn't even hurt and I feel great and whatever.
Yeah, we've all gotten
Tell
shots
them
before.
that you didn't turn into an alligator like Bolsonaro seems to think you might. Tell them that you didn't get a government chip implanted in you. Like all of those things, feel free to reiterate as many times as you want that it's safe.
Yeah.
But I don't need to hear you tell me lies about how it didn't hurt. It's a fucking shot. It hurt. It was horrible.
It hurt at the time, and also like the one thing that we know, I mean, besides some bad reactions that have been happening,
Right.
which isn't abnormal and actually happened in the clinical trials, and that's why they're making
Right.
people wait for 15 minutes. Like you should not be getting alarmed about those things either, because I've been
Right.
seeing
Yeah, that's common with vaccines.
a lot of people posting that video of that nurse who passed out after it and being like, "Well, I'm not getting this anymore." It's like, okay, everybody settle down.
Also, this is something that happens with all vaccines. It's not like this
that's what I was
vaccine
gonna say,
uniquely
like,
has allergic reactions.
Right. Well, where I was going with that is that like we know in fact that it hurts because we have received the flu vaccine before, and
Right.
that hurts.
We are humans who've gotten shots before.
And also the one thing, like I said, besides some of those like weird, crazy things that have been happening, like very disparately across the country, the one thing that we know specifically that it will do is hurt. Like that's the one reaction that you will have is arm soreness after you get the shot.
And that is, it's like, well, I hate when people tell you this about the flu shot, and you're like, look, I'll get the fucking flu shot if I need to get the flu shot, but don't tell me it didn't hurt.
Yeah, it's a bitch. The flu shot.
It's a horrible thing to do. Yeah. You have to. The year when I got it this year, I went in prepared to know I would hate it and that it would be horrible. And so I didn't suffer the way that I did the year before when everyone told me it was no big deal. And then no one believed, it was like everyone was gaslighting me about how horrible it was.
Right.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
Look, Rashida is the only person who can be trusted in the entire Americas to tell it like it is. Cause she
Obviously.
at least posted that she was like, I don't like needles and it hurt, but it was fine.
Yeah. In every instance, she's really the one.
I mean, she's the one, but she at least admitted that it hurt as much as any other injection. Blood tests hurt. Everything with needles hurts. That's the thing about them. Like, don't try to lie to me about that. In any case, Mike Pence, in what I would argue is the only responsible thing he's done as vice president, and only after he's done 1,000 irresponsible things in relation to coronavirus, did do the right thing and get it on national live TV so that people could see him getting it.
Yeah.
That was the right thing to do, especially because his own administration has been allowing all this misinformation to propagate about the vaccine. So it's kind of his fault that everyone is in this situation to begin with.
Yeah.
But I feel like at least that was one good thing and also I would contend our bar for like good governance has gotten so low that I was like, wow, a politician doing a thing you should do as a politician when it's like the only person in the administration who's done one single thing that I would contend that any politician, like George Bush wouldn't have been someone I would have been shocked to see get this vaccine on live television. Even though I would have been shocked to see him have many kinds of good ideas. That would have been one that I think he at least in general considered himself like a person serving the American people in the broadest possible sense of the word, and like would have probably gotten the shot on live TV. Yeah. Trump is probably not going to because he's trying to stoke all of this resentment among this weird like far right anti-vaxxer movement that's developing, which is it used to be just like a bunch of like rich white ladies in Brentwood.
Yes.
And
Beverly
then
Hills, I
like,
think, has like one of the lowest, like has like a third world country vaccination
yeah.
rate.
Well, and that's why there were all those measles outbreaks in the
Yeah,
last couple of years.
right.
And then there's one Hasidic community that vaccinates and one that doesn't. And it's because it's like either like the Satmars don't vaccinate and the Lubavitch do or something, but there was a big measles outbreak in
Oh, I think I
Kiryat
remember that.
Joel, which is like
Yeah.
a full Hasidic town in upstate New York. And also in Brooklyn, there were measles outbreaks, and it was because one of the doctors in one of those communities was telling people not to vaccinate. They've also had similar issues getting them to stop socializing for COVID.
Oh, yes.
That's the Satmars had a 10,000 or 7,000 person wedding a couple weeks ago that I was livid about. In any case,
really,
my point is, get the vaccine and just know that it will be horrible, but that you'll get through it.
Yes.
And if you need to bring someone to hold your hand, do that.
I know. We also
I am 37 and I make people hold my hand when I get a vaccine, and that's life. You know, you just sometimes have to do that. In any case, we found out some good news that's also weird.
Yeah, there's like apparently 40% more actual vaccine doses than we thought, because like apparently how they bottle them, you know, they all come in those little glass bottles. You've seen them, they're on the news all the time now these days. Basically, they pack them with more, they tell you how many doses are in them, and they measure that out, and then they put extra in there, basically like, you know, for spillage, for mismeasurement, for whatever, basically just to ensure that there will be at least the 5 doses, which are supposedly in each of those bottles. So what happened is, you know, they are now in the hands of healthcare professionals who are giving out these shots, and they're like, hey, you know, and they're probably being extra careful with them, maybe more so than they would with other things. And they're like, hey, we've got extra doses in here, which initially everybody was sort of like, that's insane. Can these people not measure properly or like know how many doses are in a bottle? But apparently it's very abnormal with like those types of medications that like are those liquid medications that arrive like that. And so what they did was they got FDA approved, and usually you wouldn't be able to use them.
Right. You're only allowed to use it for the number of doses that's in the bottle as it's marked.
Right. So they had to get FDA approval to use the additional, which they like immediately got. So now where each of those bottles was supposed to have 5 doses in them, people are getting at least 6 and in sometimes 7 cases, or 7 doses if there like isn't like literally any spillage, or depending on how much actually made it in the bottle, over 5. So like up to 40% more vaccine. Probably not quite that much. That would be if everybody was getting 7, which it doesn't seem like maybe is the case. But like there's actually a lot more vaccine out in the world currently right now, because it's already.
Well, and I've been seeing evidence of it with people I know who work in hospitals are getting it. So like I've been seeing people on social media getting it who work in hospitals. So and then I've also been seeing people like Marco Rubio get it, who have been working tirelessly to make us not believe that this coronavirus pandemic is real.
Yeah.
And while I would contend that a lot of members of Congress are national treasures who deserve to get a dose of coronavirus, like my BFF Rashida, I would also contend that it is a little annoying to watch some of the people that have been responsible for propagating misinformation about this and for downplaying the severity of the epidemic be among the first to get vaccinated for it.
Right. Well, and the other thing that, you know, sort of makes you upset about it is because the reason that, you know, a lot of people have been rightly asking why members of Congress have been getting it, because like not everyone who works in a hospital has received it yet, right?
Right.
You know, teachers haven't received it yet, frontline workers haven't received it yet, and so people are like, why are these asshats getting it? And the answer, you know, in short, is that it's because of continuance of government, right? They want to be able to sort of like anything that they can do to sort of like make sure that government is functioning, you do. And so that's why they're all getting the vaccine. Especially there's been a million outbreaks in Congress because of these very assholes like Marco Rubio doing the wrong thing at every turn and not wearing masks and having giant meetings and going to 900-person Christmas parties. But I would contend that continuance of what fucking government?
Right, they haven't been governing, so that is a hilarious. Nothing.
Like, I don't think we need to ensure that they stay there and continue in the functions that they've been doing, because they haven't been doing any functions.
I would also contend that first of all, did you hear that Mike Pompeo's party only had like 100 people show up?
Oh, well, good.
So the 900-person party didn't even happen because even the invites
he's
in quarantine.
He's self-quarantining right now.
Yeah, he got exposed too. Yeah. I would contend that if you are on the record suggesting that the pandemic is just not that serious, then you should be willing to walk the walk. That's And then there's also there's some conversation about whether we should just give everyone 1 dose or we should all get the 2 doses. the one dose delivers a certain amount of immunity, but not as strong as 2 doses. But obviously, we would like to get everyone possible vaccinated as quickly as possible. So there's a lot of conversation about that.
Yeah,
as
I
well.
hadn't heard that actually. I heard an interview until this week because they were talking about it, and it was an interview with Dr. Fauci, I believe. And I didn't realize that apparently that was a very hotly contested discussion in terms of how they wanted to roll out vaccine distribution because there were two camps that were sort of, you know, really kind of fighting with each other about this because like you do get some antibodies from one dose. So would it have made more sense to get as many people one dose as possible and then like literally not even know when the second doses were going to be ready just because that would have supplied enough immunity that we could have gone, you know, that would have been a little bit better, but ultimately that wasn't what was decided. They felt like it made the most sense to get, you know, certain groups of people both doses. Now, obviously, you have to wait for I think 3 weeks for the Pfizer one and the Moderna one, which just got approved and is being packed onto trucks right now. That one, I think you have to wait 4 weeks. But it is interesting that was such a sort of like hotly contested conversation. I didn't realize that was the case. So that's interesting that they decided.
Well, I guess
the way that they did.
that's like an actual science conversation to have, unlike whether herd immunity is real.
Right. Or whether we should just like get there, you know, just by all going out and like having a giant orgy or something.
Right. Well, it seems like LA might have tried that and it's not working out great.
It's not working out great at all.
LA is the new epicenter of and I've been trying to figure out why it was. And I wonder if it's because we kept being told that the crisis was coming and it just never got as serious in LA as it was everywhere else. So I wonder if everyone was just like, oh, we're safe here. And then went to Thanksgiving.
Part of it. I mean, certainly part of this is a fairly consistent rise and then stabilizing like since Thanksgiving. But I do think that there is a certain element of like, certainly people are are good here, at least in the city of Los Angeles, about wearing their masks and doing things like that. But like, I do think that you're right. There was a level of like, okay, well, we've got this under control. We're doing outdoor dining. We're going to shopping malls. We're doing all of these things. And I think that people probably just got lazy. And
also, I think after a certain point, like it becomes hard. Like it's one thing when there's a low rate of it in the population. You're not likely to accidentally get it at a grocery store or accidentally get it in places where you are being careful. But once it becomes really prevalent, there are dangers that didn't used to exist because you actually like can accidentally get it while you're out and about being safe.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. They're now saying, I think that like up to or as potentially as many people as 1 in 50 in the city, they're saying now are probably infected with it. So you really do sort of like have to question, you know, I'm back to doing Instacart. I'm back to doing what I was in March.
Right, in March, yeah.
But people aren't though, you know, like, and that's the thing. It's exactly what you said. That's what's happened is that, you know, nobody has like gone back to realizing that it's worse than it was when we weren't going outside.
Right.
Yeah.
One person who's a public official who is definitively not getting the vaccine is Brazil's president, Bolsonaro, who
I should be laughing because Brazil is a disaster zone.
Disaster of coronavirus at the moment. But also, it doesn't help that they have, you know, he's very Trumpian in his way, and he's had coronavirus. So he was like, why would I get the vaccine when I have the antibodies? Even though if you've had it, you're still supposed to get the vaccine because they don't know how long the antibodies last or really anything about them. And also, Brazil has some documented cases of reinfection as well. We have a couple of those, but they do too. But he also said he's mad at Pfizer. He said another thing that has to be made very clear. There in the Pfizer contract, it's very clear that we, Pfizer, are not responsible for any side effect. If you become an alligator, it's your problem. And what's worse, tampering with people's immune systems. So he is concerned about becoming an alligator, and that is why he can't get the coronavirus vaccine.
Oh, boy.
As an alligator, he might be a more thoughtful presence.
Not less anyway.
He's not going to be more trouble as an alligator than he currently is. So that seems fine.
Yeah.
We also had news of new cabinet picks, one of which is so downright unacceptable that we can't even with it, because Pete fucking Buttigieg, Mayor Mouseface himself, and or Mouse Bitch, depending on what day you speak to us, was given a cabinet post as the head of the Department of Transportation. And look, I know we couldn't give Rahm Emanuel that job. That's who they were kind of looking at. And I know why, like, that's a no from everyone.
Yeah.
No, like literally nobody wants Rahm Emanuel in their lives at all.
Yeah.
But there was not one single other person in America who was more qualified to lead the Department of Transportation than the former mayor of South Bend, Indiana. Not one anywhere.
Yes, there was.
I mean,
you want to know what's hilarious about this, and not hilarious because it's deeply upsetting, but like, had we even known that we were supposed to be protesting Pete Buttigieg for transportation, we probably would have done so. But the two people that were the Biden administration was smart about not floating his name for this, because the two people whose names got floated, the reason that they didn't get the job is because the people in their cities thought to themselves, no, we're not. Nobody in Chicago is trying to have Rahm Emanuel.
Nobody in America is trying to have Rahm Emanuel involved in their lives.
Right, but
ever.
certainly, but the reason that both were being protested by people was because of the issues that they themselves and their cities have had in race relations, right?
Right.
Like that's what
Garcetti is the other person who was being
Eric Garcetti is the other one, right? And so there were a ton of BLM protests, like outside his house for like ever since like his name first got floated.
Since forever. I've been literally getting Instagram updates nonstop for protests that are protesting him being part of the cabinet.
I know, and I feel, I'm glad that worked, but I also am now like, oh,
who knew that? But I would much rather have Garcetti.
We're stuck with Pete Buttigieg, who has the same issues. Right? I mean,
the same issues and less experience.
And less experience, right? I mean,
the lack of any qualification whatsoever.
Right, exactly.
Other than, as he put it himself, being fascinated with transportation as a child.
I know, yeah. But he would have. Pete Buttigieg is the type of person that had he been named the Secretary of the Interior, he would have had a fascination with the interior since childhood.
That's right. Public lands would have been his most prized area of study as a child.
Right. Whoever he's in front of is the thing that he's most obsessed with, and has been since he was a small child.
That's right. Well, he's been sort of carefully creating a persona that can morph into whatever makes him the most sort of like obnoxious, needy, like wannabe politician in whatever. Yeah. I have one very specific qualm with this that has nothing to do with him and is also unfair because it involves two people that I hate.
Well, it sort of has to do with him because these two are sort of related in the And
I think I've mentioned this before, and I think we all know I fucking hate Amy Klobuchar. She's awful. I had said that I thought that if we were going to have awful people be in charge of judiciary, she should be the one, because she'd be great as the head of the Judiciary Committee. I believe that, even though she's terrible. I mean, of the options, obviously, we're talking with limited options. But Amy Klobuchar, like Pete Buttigieg, was forced out of the presidential race by those Obama phone calls, by DNC meddling right after Super Tuesday.
Yep.
And
right before Super Tuesday.
I mean, before Super Tuesday.
Yeah.
And Pete Buttigieg got a fucking cabinet post, and Amy Klobuchar has gotten legit nothing.
Yeah, it was she and Liz Warren and basically all the other people.
Yeah, like where is justice for Liz and Amy? I don't get, like, Pete Buttigieg doesn't have a constituency. Millennials hate him. Gays hate him. Black people hate him. White people hate him. Old people hate him. Young people hate him. He is what someone like Joe Biden thinks appeals to millennials. I think we said that when we saw him in Iowa, but unequivocally that I can't think of one single millennial who finds him even halfway passable as a human being.
No self-respecting person under 40 likes Pete.
Yes, and anyone who tells you they do like him is somebody who has recently decided they like him to essentially be annoying because he got a fancy job posting and now they want to seem like they were on the boat early. Right. Nobody likes Pete Buttigieg. The gay rights orgs didn't want to have to deal with him, and that was very complicated because a lot of organizations' whole reason for existing is to endorse gay people running for office. Like that was there were just people everywhere along the way who wanted nothing to do with nothing to do with Pete Buttigieg, who were supposed to be the exact demographics he appealed to.
Yeah.
And listen, I realize that Amy Klobuchar has a pretty limited demographic herself that appeals to her. Sure. But it's at least real people.
Well, that's the thing, I think
Existing people.
right. A part of why he got a cabinet post, besides the fact that he probably was promised one when he was also forced to drop out in the same way that Amy Klobuchar was, is because unlike Amy Klobuchar and unlike Liz Warren and unlike so many of the other people who ran for president in 2020, Pete Buttigieg is a man who will never win another election. I'm sorry, like at me, but like, and part of that, look, I get, like, part of that is because he lives in Indiana and it's hard for a Democrat statewide there. Although, like, it has not been so long since Barack Obama won in Indiana, so like, maybe we should rethink that. But, he is a man who needed a cabinet position to continue to have any sort of relevance because, he's already, he lost the DNC chairship in spectacular fashion. He's run statewide in Indiana, and he had his clock cleaned by somebody who went on to be one of the worst senators that the United States has ever known. I mean, this is a guy who should be in obscurity right now.
Yeah.
And we would all be better off if that's where he was. And also, I want to say
forward to him going back to obscurity,
well,
where
I
we
do
don't
too.
have to think about him anymore.
Well, it might be after he runs the Department of Transportation into the ground, because the one thing that we all know, and had forgotten anyway until recently, about South Bend, Indiana, besides the racist police force that he oversaw and had specific issues with, was that they were also the pothole capital of Indiana.
That's right.
Domino's in 2019 was giving away grants for $5,000 to each state in their, quote, paving for pizza program. And South Bend, Indiana received that grant in 2019 to fix their potholes. So Pete Buttigieg had to get Domino's money to
fix the worst pothole situation in Indiana.
In all of Indiana, right.
A state that isn't famous for all of its luxurious public financing ideas.
And how many potholes could a city the size of fucking Fargo have anyway?
I mean, it's
so
wild.
Listen, and speaking of city the size of Fargo, is another reason why he was never qualified to be president, but certainly isn't qualified to lead a gigantic government agency.
No. That deals specifically with an issue that's of specific interest to cities.
Yes.
Like, transportation is most critical in large urban areas. That's where the transportation infrastructure serves the most critical purpose. Yeah. It is important to rural America to get their products to market, but the complicated transportation infrastructure of cities is so much bigger and so much wilder than anything that you could know about as the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, or as a child looking into your love of transportation.
Right. Well, it's why the two people that had been floated were mayors of large Chicago and Los Angeles.
It's crazy.
God, I
hate that guy.
Him. Like, and look, maybe some of it is something that I should talk to my therapist about, but I really just,
it's maddening.
The sight of that guy really, and now just like knowing that, like, I mean, what is he? He is who I think of, like, when someone like makes the joke about, like, you just need to say it with the confidence of a mediocre white man.
Yes. Right. They mean Pete Buttigieg.
They mean Pete Buttigieg.
Pete Buttigieg.
And that, I think, is what I disdain about him.
He's the guy that mansplains your own area of expertise to you in college.
Sure.
That's like, he's basically mansplaining transportation to us right now. Literally all of us are more qualified to run this agency than him.
Yeah.
Just by growing up in a large city, I feel like I know more about transportation than he does. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, like, I can't with him. I don't want to with him. There are 1 zillion millennials who are better than him. We're a huge generation. There's so many of us, and so many of us are so much better than Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah.
Anyway, Biden made one good choice. He worked really hard to make one individual solitary good choice. And I think it was after he had to be talked out of several bad choices, because the people he were also bad choices. But he did pick Deb Haaland to be the Secretary of the Interior.
Amazing.
And that's something progressives wanted, thinking people wanted, just people who have good ideas in general wanted, people who like good ideas wanted. I mean, anyone who is somewhere in the realm of a person who's good idea adjacent was interested in this. He still tried to float other people just to be difficult. But that is one good thing that we can celebrate.
Yes.
And that is also, I mean, it's also wild that he has not done much work / any work to reach out to the sort of constituencies that supported other candidates. Like Deb Haaland was a Warren endorser, a Warren surrogate, and we saw her do surrogacy.
Left candidates, because he gave,
But exactly, it's like, I can't believe there's not a single Sanders surrogate anywhere in his realm of thinking.
That's one thing that I really want to talk about here, because like, look, we have talked about all of these sort of specific people, and it's been hard to sort of like look at it on the whole as like a rollout, because you really sort of like do need to get a bigger picture. It has certainly become more diverse. There were sort of like, there were Black groups initially that were not happy. I think there's been some more nominations that I think I heard the interview.
Well, all he does is remind us of how diverse his nominations are all the time. So I guess that's what we're supposed to take away from this now.
But now that we're getting to the end of this here, this is a party that is at bare minimum 35% the party of Bernie Sanders. Right. We've proven that in 2 elections now, and we've proven that through public polling on literally every single specific issue in the world. So the fact that there is,
well, if you poll it on issues, it's like 75% the party of Bernie Sanders.
But the fact that there is 0, and when I say 0, I mean
like
0,
literal
literal
people.
0, not just trying to be dramatic for the sake of effect. That come anywhere from that wing of the party. And look, I have a feeling if you asked him about it, the excuse that he would give is that it's going to be a divided Senate, as if these other choices are just going to get a walk in the park from Mitch McConnell if he has the Senate. Like, you could, you could start nominating Marxists, and they're not going to have a harder time than Pete Buttigieg is, who they're probably going to fucking grill. So like that,
well, they should.
I don't accept that as an excuse for why you wouldn't pick somebody. And look, I know that labor is still out there. That is often who a progressive sort of like ends up heading. And like, fine, Sanders himself had said that like that is the post that he would want if he was going to get one. He's probably not going to be him. So like, maybe there will be one there, but that is still also just one. Right. That's so.
Yeah. In a party that is a third this, if not more.
Right. I feel like I became reinvigorated in my rage at this week, now that we have more of them and that it's basically like almost complete. Because
I think Bernie Sanders became reinvigorated in his rage.
Well, I mean, part of my rage came from an interview that I heard with him on NPR this week. But it's real though, because we've been looking at each one of them individually for the last month and making conjectures and sort of trying to figure out who it was going to be, and is this person good? And some of them have been surprises, so we didn't even know what we were supposed to think of some people, like the EPA administrator. Like, who's that guy? Maybe he'll be fine, we don't know. But like, just the idea that it is completely void of anyone who is even vaguely progressive, except Deb Haaland. Who like,
and Deb Haaland, by the way, one of the more conservative Warren surrogates.
Yes, agreed.
I mean,
yeah, she's no Ayanna Pressley.
But she's no Ayanna Pressley.
Right.
Who I still can't figure out why she's not the face of the Democratic Party.
I can't either.
I mean, that's a win for all of America. Yeah. In any case,
anyway,
don't even get me on the Ayanna Pressley story.
It's okay to be pissed off about these cabinet picks, though. I think that's a bigger point.
Yeah, and I mean, I think also, I feel like one person to celebrate is not a promise that his governance will be what something progressives are comfortable with. Yeah. Like, I think so let's go over some of the other people that will be dealing with environmental issues.
Yeah, because I think
this was announced in a list of people that included Deb Haaland, but also included some people we're not happy about.
Yeah.
So he's been saying a lot of vague things about his plans for the environment without clarifying what his actual plans are. Which has been frustrating to me, because there are certain things I listen for when I'm hearing political rhetoric from someone that I don't particularly trust. And he is using like every like corporate dog whistle that I can, and every sort of like classic omission that I can possibly think of every single time he speaks.
Mm-hmm.
So, they're going to try to block the current administration's initiatives, which is like the bare minimum for even like being human beings and alive in this administration.
Yep.
But they also said there's going to be an emphasis on looking out for low-income, working class, and minority communities hit hardest by fossil fuel pollution and climate change. Now, that is a priority that is important that we should have. With their continual rejection of the Green New Deal and anything that looks like real investment in these communities, however, are these initiatives going to be public-private partnerships that end up continuing to exploit the communities that are supposed to benefit from them in favor of large corporations reaping profits off their backs? Because that is oftentimes what that is code for when you don't specify your policy. Like, yeah. Well, I want to hear communities that not only they're going to like make sure are not being excessively polluted, but that they are going to invest in. That they're going to invest in making sure that these problems are continually not problems, not that they're going to be like, well, we have one regulation that prevents a community where everyone already has cancer from getting further pollution, but we're not going to do anything about the fact that everyone already has cancer and the ground is poisoned. Like,
and to that point, besides the fact of the language that they're using, I mean, you also have to sort of like look at the actual people that they have appointed to these things.
Exactly.
You've got Jennifer Granholm, who's going to be the energy secretary, who was the former governor of Michigan, and we know the environmental issues that affect Michigan, that specifically affect the Black and brown communities in that state. Right. And I realize
some might argue that state is for having environmental issues that affect Black and brown communities.
Yeah, exactly. Michael Regan has been appointed the EPA administrator, and while there's sort of some two sides, there's some people who think that maybe he will be okay. He certainly has a mixed record on some environmental justice issues. Like Greenpeace talked about like how he failed to protect communities from the health impacts of living near hog farms and approving multiple permits for the carbon intensive
for the wood pellet industry, which is very carbon
in North Carolina, because that's where he's from. So like you can say that you're going to do something, but then you also have to appoint the people who are going to give us confidence that you're actually going to even be able to do what you are calling the bare minimum. I mean, none of these people are proving to me that they are the people who are like meant to execute these things.
No, and even for a couple of non-Senate approved posts, National Climate Advisor posts, Gina McCarthy, who we appointed to that, was the EPA administrator under Obama, and she's the EPA administrator that was working for the administration when Flint came to everyone's attention. And people in Flint, I read an article from like the Detroit Free Press or something about how people in Flint are really livid with that choice, because even though a lot of environmental groups seem okay with her as a choice, the EPA actually knew about the violations in Flint for like a year before they did anything. So even though Rick Schneider obviously was the sort of appointed the grand villain of that situation and was certainly an enormous part of the problem, the EPA did a lot of finger pointing instead of admitting that it was actually like they didn't step in to actually declare a state of emergency or even sue to make sure that Michigan was following environmental policy until months after that story had broken and that they had known about it. Yeah. So a lot of people in Flint were like, well, we don't trust this woman, which they would be right to. And I would say I have some unique experience with EPA administrators lying to communities and failing to acknowledge flaws in their work for years at a time. And I can say most assuredly that it's not a great position to be in as a resident. I can tell you that it has not turned out fun for me. Yeah. So I'm certainly sensitive to those concerns from people in Flint, because there is, I would say, no more like specific ridiculous travesty than Flint. It's like we've all known the name of this nothing town in Michigan for literal years because it took so long for anyone to even start to address what was an incredibly fixable problem.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even that expensive of a problem. Nothing about it needed to go on this long, but like that is like Michigan is like the site of like our most public environmental failure.
Yes.
So the fact that everyone's got all these involvements in Michigan doesn't make me feel great.
No.
There's also, the chair of the Council on Environmental Quality, Brenda Mallory, is somebody who was general counsel there under Obama. It seems like, I mean, she's a lawyer and she mostly works in like regulation stuff. She seems fine.
Sure.
One thing though that continues to frustrate me about these Biden rollouts, and I think it's just like a sticking point that has hit me because I'm so like cynical about the backgrounds of a lot of these people, but he constantly goes out of his way in really clumsy language to remind us that the picks are diverse. And I'm like, yes, people can see with their eyes that some of these people are African American and like good,
And Native
but
American.
also and Native American, like these good, but this doesn't absolve you of the responsibility to actually like represent those communities like in a way where they like get environmental justice. Like this, like it's almost like because he did this. What did he do this? He did this with another one too. He with another office where he. Oh, it was with the communications team where he was going on about how it was the first all-female communications team. And I was like, oh, you hired all women in a traditionally female field. That it's like announcing that you hired all female teachers for a role that just at that level had never been all female. Like, great. Hire all women to do everything. I'm in favor of hiring more women, but like that doesn't promise us that you have been thinking about how to best serve the American people if all of them are just hacks who worked on all of these other who've worked in other hacky positions doing hacky work.
Right.
I saw an interview with Cornel West, who sometimes just says what you want to hear, even though he's got a crazy appearance and he is all over the place on the camera and he can't keep focused. But he was just like, you know, people also have to be people of principle in order, like it's not enough to just appoint diverse people. We have to actually like serve the communities that we're supposedly seeing represented in these picks. And I just feel like they go on, they pat themselves on the back so much for this. And it's just like, all right, show us that you're going to do the thing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to hear you pat yourself on the back about, you know, having a diverse cabinet when you promise to have a diverse cabinet. You should have a diverse, everyone should have a diverse cabinet.
Right.
Like, shouldn't be special.
Yeah.
In any case, that we're still waiting for Attorney General and Labor and a few other random ones.
Yeah.
But that is where we stand on Cabinet Gate 2020. And it's convinced me, as if I needed further convincing, that I don't trust Joe Biden.
No, and he doesn't.
He hasn't earned my trust with any of these picks.
Well, and he doesn't intend. I mean, he doesn't care about you, so it's not.
Well, no, exactly.
It's not like he's intending to regain it in any sort of way.
He's not serving me because I'm not who paid him to do all this. I'm not where his money comes from. And also, just FYI to everyone, there are rumors out there that Rahm is not out of contention yet.
Oh God.
So we're not out of the Rahm woods as of yet, though it would be nice if we could get out of them soon.
Part of me almost just hopes that he does nominate him, just so he actually sees, like, because I think the rage would be. I don't know that he's like fully tracking like how angry people will be about that.
Also, it's like I feel like he seems to really enjoy doing a thumb in the eye of BLM. He like is constantly doing exactly the wrong thing when it comes to racial justice choices, movements, anything. Like it's like how he All Lives Mattered Eric Garner's family at the convention. He just like he seems to be like incredibly tone deaf in a way that is where he's like openly patronizing and antagonistic to the racial justice movement. And I just like don't know why that would be a thing you would want to do in this moment in time. It just seems like not the time. I mean, it's never the time. It's never the time to be rude to a justice movement. I'm just saying, like this in particular seems like a weird time when a lot of the rest of the Democratic establishment at least seems fairly afraid of the racial justice movement, if not dedicated to it.
Right.
I mean, if that weird kente cloth kneeling that the Wakanda Forever Congress photo that they took is indicative of anything, it's that they're fucking terrified of BLM. So, as they should be, because they are being worthless. Other big news, Bill Barr resigned / probably got fired. So that's
totally got fired because it happened fairly quickly. Well, like, look, we have been hearing about maybe Trump is going to get rid of Bill Barr for like some time, right? Because like he hasn't been like fully as insane as maybe Trump would have wanted him to be. But this came fairly quickly after Bill Barr claimed that there was no widespread voter fraud.
Yeah. And then Trump was just like, goodbye. And look, when Bill Barr came into office, a lot of people thought, oh, someone from the Poppy Bush era, maybe he'll be reasonable.
Do you remember that? People were so excited about it. I mean, excited maybe is not the right word, but like even Democrats were like, oh, okay.
Hopeful.
This is like a person who has worked in government before. This is a person who is like, we can just like generally trust to like be, you know, to just to do the people's work.
Well, and I've
here.
been curious because I think to me, the thing that I remember most strikingly about that made me think, oh, maybe he'll try to rein it in, is he is a person who has been in the DC dinner party circuit. So he like isn't like one of these Trump people that came out of left field that you're like, well, this person was never going to be part of the fun. So like they weren't getting invited to dinner parties at the McCain's house anyway. So like whatever.
Yeah.
But Bill Barr was on the dinner party circuit. He was somebody who was part of establishment DC, and that establishment DC is its own animal. And a lot of the time establishment DC is the only bipartisan thing happening in DC. Is like there's, you know, there is sort of like a kind of camaraderie in the establishment DC circles that does cross party boundaries in a way that should make you very uncomfortable. Yeah. But Bill Barr was part of that scene. He is somebody who basically gave up all of his dinner party privileges forever in order to do this job. Right. And I thought maybe he would try to at least protect his image slightly, but instead we can just, hopefully he will be remembered for that 5 minutes of television in which we watched the military violently remove peaceful protesters from a church in DC so that they could have a photo op of the president holding the Bible upside down.
Yeah.
And that I feel like really kind of sums up the Bill Barr experience.
Yeah. I agree.
But goodbye, you won't be missed. His deputy is going to take over. And he's not really a Trump loyalist, so it seems like maybe he'll just hopefully do nothing until.
Yeah, I think that's the hope, because we're going to get into a few things where he might maybe would need to involve himself, like if Trump was going to, you know, appoint a special counsel, or, you know, we've got some stories coming up.
Oh, I would love
where the deputy attorney general would need to get involved. But like supposedly the reasoning that Trump actually hadn't gotten rid of Bill Barr when he sort of like initially started hinting at it was that there was sort of like no reason to think that his deputy, Jeff Rosen, was actually going to sort of like do Trump's bidding, at least in the way that Bill Barr felt mostly comfortable doing. So hopefully we can just sort of like ride out the next month with Jeff Rosen and not have
working to do nothing.
Right, exactly.
Working hard to accomplish nothing. Well, the reason this is all coming up this week is because the Electoral College certified the Biden win.
Yeah.
So even Mitch McConnell was like, okay, guys, let's stop with all the crazy steal, you know, vote.
He congratulated him on the Senate floor this week, said that he'd called him. Add watching the Electoral College votes to the list of additional things that Trump has forced us to do that I never want to have to do again in my life.
You guys, these procedural things are
boring, and CNN was airing it, and it struck me as, I mean, I certainly noted this as I was watching it. Most of them were being like broadcast from whatever state's like local, not even local news, but like basically like public access was pretty much like, because no one wants to watch these things, but yet here we were all day Monday on CNN.
I did
watch.
I feel like there's one thing that I think might be a positive outcome of the Trump era, which is it will be really hard to steal an election after this because everyone is aware of every dumb procedural maneuver that you could ever try. Right. We've all had to learn so much about the process. We've all had to learn what Safe Harbor Day is and how the Electoral College actually votes, like literally how they vote, not just like that it exists and that they vote. Mm-hmm. We've had to learn, you know, what days each state's election need to be certified. Results need to be certified by. We've had to learn all sorts of facts about elections that no non-specialist in elections should ever seek to know or have to know or want to know. And now, if someone tries to steal an election again, it's going to be like a bunch of like raving liberals out there being like, no, you cannot do that before the second Sunday of the month, according to the state legislature, you know, according to the statute that says that blah, blah, blah. Like, it's going to be like madness if anyone tries to do anything untoward in the next few years, because everyone has such eagle eyes because we're all waiting for someone to try to steal an election every single election that we have.
A lot of armchair election lawyering going on.
Tons. Yeah. And I feel like if nothing else, we now have a civics education that will keep elections secure from now on. Yeah. We'll see. But it just occurred to me that we all acquired a lot of knowledge that would help us stop an election hack.
Yeah.
or election theft, should we choose to look for one.
Yes.
So also there were those threats from Stephen Miller that they were going to send their own electors to challenge the elections, but everyone was ready for them, so none of them got in. They did that in Michigan, and there were guards outside the Michigan Electoral College vote, and they were just like, no, you're not real electors, you can't come in here. And they were like, but we represent the people. And they were like, we're coming and we're not letting you in. So everything just proceeded the way it was supposed to, even though we all had to worry that something was going to happen.
Yeah.
And this is why you don't have an electoral college, beyond the fact that it misrepresents certain people's votes. It also forces you, it gives you like 100 different opportunities to steal the election in dumb ways.
Right?
Like, let's just be done when we know how many votes votes were cast.
Yeah.
If states could just certify their votes and then we're just like, we did it, the election's over, we wouldn't have had to spend last week worrying about anything.
Nope.
We could have just eaten peppermint bark and, decorated our Christmas trees and enjoyed our lives. In any case, yeah, exactly. Joe Biden made a speech after they made the certification announcement, and he coughed through the entire speech, and I found it too stressful to watch, so I had to leave the room. I can't have him, give the man a cough drop so that he doesn't exhibit the main symptom of coronavirus when he's giving his acceptance speech. I just can't deal with the stress. I already worry so much when he's speaking that he'll say something crazy.
I know.
I don't need the additional stress of him hacking through the entire thing.
No. Speaking of hacking. Oh, yeah.
Finally got the transition we were looking for.
Right. It's 10 years, 380 podcasts later.
That's right. The government got hacked. Most people think it was Russia. Surprise.
Sure.
Some of the agencies that got hacked include agencies you might hope wouldn't be hacked, like the Energy Department and the National Nuclear Stock Administration, which I found out recently uses a tremendous amount of our budget every year to stock nuclear weapons that we will never be able to use because you shouldn't use nuclear weapons.
Right. And because the rest of the world has moved on from nuclear weapons to hacking.
That's right.
Instead. So
right. We're busy not having the right cybersecurity to protect our nuclear weapons from hackers.
Right. We're building 20th century weapons 20 years into the 21st century.
That's right.
And that is a problem.
Well, and there was a real issue because we have something called the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, which is supposed to be in charge of securing the cybers and the infrastructure. But they had to send a message to other agencies this week that during this broad hacking situation, that they were overwhelmed and they couldn't allocate the necessary resources to respond. And part of that is because a bunch of their top officials, including the former director, got either pushed out by the Trump administration or resigned in recent weeks. So that's not suspicious or terrible.
No.
There was evidence of highly malicious activity at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission.
Yep.
And there is an ongoing investigation into how far the hacking actually got because we still don't know.
Well, that's I think what is scaring a lot of people because it's like nobody really knows when we're even going to see the results either because they don't know exactly sort of like how far they were going to get or how far they did get. So it's also the type of thing where it's like, are we going to find out in 5 years from now when we try and do something on the world stage or something like that Russia says like, oh no, actually you can't do that because we're going to shut down your power grid. Or, like we just sort of like don't know the extent of what all they were able to do. And like, look, this is a huge deal. I mean, like considering that this is the way that people are sort of like waging war on each other right now. I mean, many people were not being over dramatic in calling this an act of war this week. Certainly the president sort of downplayed it and tried to make it seem like, Russia isn't so bad. Well, it's from his BFFs
in Russia.
Right. Exactly. But I mean, like, people, I think somebody called this like the 2020 equivalent of Pearl Harbor. I mean, like this was a huge deal. I mean, a really huge deal.
And it was so wide ranging.
Understand it, which is why we're not going to talk about it anymore.
Exactly.
But you should know
here's what I gleaned from it. We might need to rebuild basically our like entire cybersecurity system because it was so wide ranging that no how far into our system they got.
Yeah.
And why are we the ones always getting hacked and we're not doing any of the hacking? I never hear a story that's like Americans hacked into our system, we're mad. It's always like Russia hacked into China, hacked into America's system, North Korea hacked into America. North Koreans don't even have computers. Like, they've invested in hacking because they know that that's the wave of the future, and they're always ready for war in North Korea. They don't fool around there. But like, I feel a little bit jealous that other countries are like, if we're gonna be a country that's so obsessed with national security, like, why are we doing it so wrong?
Right, like nobody loves going to war more than us.
Well, and nobody spends
So
more of their budget on ridiculous security measures than we do. I mean, we waste zillions of dollars every year on unnecessary war things.
yeah,
We're prepared for all sorts of unnecessary war-like conflicts,
yep.
but we can't stop Russia from hacking like the entire security system, the entire national security system's internet. Like,
I
it just
know.
seems crazy.
I
But
know.
I don't know enough about the internet to explain it further than that. So we're going to move on.
We're gonna move on to more
Sidney
crazy.
Powell might be back.
Right. Speaking of crazy,
God. We are
terrible.
killing these transitions. I mean that figuratively and literally.
Yeah. First off, there was a meeting at the White House on Friday, which sounds like a true delight. I really wish that I could have been there. As far as meetings at the White House go, which I'm sure many of them are insane, but this one sounds specifically crazy. That had Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, Michael Flynn, some other people on the phone. That just devolved into like literally everyone screaming at each other about how they weren't doing enough to support the president in overturning the election, including like Michael Flynn continuing to suggest that we just have martial law and have the military keep Trump. Right. So that meeting's happening on Friday night.
When I love, they've turned on voting machines, which is so funny because that was a Democratic talking point for a long time. And also there is now a Democratic conspiracy theory about a different voting machine company that they only came up with because Donald Trump was mad at the Dominion voting machines. And so we are now in like and I've decided to devote myself to the left-wing conspiracy theory about it because I just think it sounds fun. But I feel like the not trusting electronic voting machines was always the purview of the far left. And all of a sudden, Donald Trump has thrown that into complete chaos because he's mad at, they're trying to seize voting machines because he's mad that they didn't vote for him in the voting machines.
Yeah, Giuliani is trying to get Ken Cuccinelli, who's the head of the Department of Homeland Security, to hand over all of the Dominion voting machines.
They conveniently don't mention other voting machine company though, which also had voting machines in all these places that he lost.
Yeah. And Ken Cuccinelli just keeps telling him that he can't do that because he doesn't have the authority to do it. Like he can't actually do that.
I love when Trump gets really obsessed with taking down corporation, but only because they personally hurt him and then doesn't want to deal with other businesses that are in the exact same line of work that didn't personally hurt him.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a common theme in his life.
Yeah.
He's like mad very specifically at only the people that he's very specifically mad at. But he makes broad claims about how can we trust him.
I know. But one other thing that came from this insane meeting is that Donald Trump wants to maybe appoint a special counsel to look into election fraud. And
I love it.
Right. And Sidney Powell's name is coming up. The same Sidney Powell who was removed from the strike force team because she was actually
too crazy.
I mean,
she was too crazy for it.
She was giving Rudy Giuliani a bad name.
She was too crazy for a team led by Rudy Giuliani. I mean, that's...
Yeah. I mean, she is a person who has also, like Michael Flynn, I mean, she represented Michael Flynn, so it's not insane that they both came up with this theory, but she wants him to use the Insurrection Act, which is like when the government can't... it enables the president to deploy troops to suppress domestic uprisings. And my question here is there an uprising right now, or are they considering having an election / voting the uprising?
That's it. There is no uprising, and I would contend the only uprisings that are happening on the right among his supporters.
Yes.
I mean, there are some uprisings happening, but none of them are happening among the people that he would be thinking might be responsible for his loss.
Right.
But I think he's mad because the Stop the Steal rallies aren't as big as he wants them to be.
I know.
So he's feeling sad because he doesn't feel like people love him.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that he has the presence of mind to try to squat in the White House so that we can watch him removed on national television. I
So good.
say again, there would be no greater ratings coup than live television of the president being forcibly removed from the White House,
Right.
or the ex-president. And I think that if there's one thing that Donald Trump is looking for in life, it's ratings.
Yeah, he should go out big for sure.
Go out big. Don't between your legs. Just don't. What I think he's going to try to do is just go to Florida and never come back. And what I would like
there's
him
been
to
some
do,
discussions about that because he's going down there for the
I know.
holidays, and people are like, "Is he just even going to ever go back?" Yeah.
And also, there's been some other discussion because he's not legally allowed to live at Mar-a-Lago. That was part of the contract of him getting to turn that into a club. And so the residents of Palm Beach sent him like a cease and desist thing that was like, you can't live here, right? Because he said he was planning to move to Mar-a-Lago. Yeah. So I think that he's going to go out with his tail between his legs because he's lame like that.
Yeah.
But I would contend that if he wants to go out on top by the only measure that matters to him, which is ratings.
I totally agree.
I mean, squat in the White House until someone has to carry you out kicking and screaming.
Also,
do it for the television.
Totally. And also for the television, definitely appoint Sidney Powell as special prosecutor on this.
Let's spend the next month following a batshit insane investigation into nothing.
Exactly.
Let them just run in circles doing that and then not accomplish all the other evil stuff they're trying to do.
Right. And he can do it without the attorney general. The attorney general would need to, the Justice Department would need to give the go ahead to like actually give this person like, subpoena power and give them any sort of like, any of the tools that they would need to like properly conduct.
But they don't need to properly conduct.
They don't need to properly.
It's fine. Sidney Powell does not need any tools to conduct this investigation.
No, she doesn't.
Because she's made up all the tools already. The tools are in her mind. It's
oh man. Yeah.
I just can't love it enough. Also, the Trumps, in what should not come as a surprise to anyone, are literally just, well, I first was calling it laundering their campaign money, but they're not even really laundering it. They're just openly stealing money from their campaign.
They stole the campaign money from the hard-earned dollars of the, poor people that donated to them.
Yeah. When I found myself getting really upset. So basically, Jared Kushner set up a shell company that they have been laundering all of the half of their campaign money into, and then using it to like pay out members of the Trump.
And when we say half of their campaign money, we mean like half of like over $1 billion. Yeah. So like this is like over $600 million that he.
$600 million that was just stolen out of his campaign for vague kinds of like media consulting that is just money that's being paid to members of the Trump family.
Right, because Laura Trump is on the board, Eric Trump is on the board, or no, Eric Trump isn't. Oh no, yeah. Oh no, Laura Trump is. Mike Pence's nephew is on the board, and they are basically like paying out all of this money for like consulting fees and things like that. But it caused a huge issue in the campaign, and you'll remember actually some reports about like how the campaign was strapped for cash, and it left everybody wondering how that was possible because we knew that they were raising so much money. We talked about it on the podcast. You'll remember they pulled a bunch of ads at one point, and everybody was like, A, why are you pulling ads? Because you're like in the middle of the election, and B, why are you doing it? Why are you short on money? Because we know how much money you've raised because you have to report it, and we know you haven't like $1 billion. You shouldn't be having to pull money, but it was because the campaign was literally paying this company, and no one knew what this company was doing.
We have no evidence that they did anything.
No evidence that they did anything with $600 million of the campaign's money.
Yeah. No, it's like, well, everyone has been, it is like, it's what sounds like money laundering because it is what money laundering is, but it's like they didn't even bother to clean the money. It's like lazy money laundering. Like they didn't. Money laundering, you have to come up with a scheme. This is like not even a real scheme. It's just like we started a company that does nothing and we just paid money directly to ourselves in that company.
Right.
That's not a scheme even.
No,
that's just like on the nose stealing. And for some reason, like this really frustrated me, not because I don't think that people who are supporting Donald Trump aren't doing terrible things, but I know that a lot of his support comes from not very well off idiots in parts of America where the economy has been decimated by his and just and I like the idea that these people donated to what they thought was a movement, even if it was a hateful movement of nonsense.
Yeah.
Like, and that money was just like directly stolen from them. like, I know that this is a movement built on cruelty, and that also maybe they should have known they were being had because they're pretty openly giving money to grifters, but it's just so cruel in a pandemic that has decimated the economy to take money out of the pockets of people who are not doing very well and just like directly give it to yourself, a rich person.
Yep.
Like, it's just so cruel. And I know that we shouldn't be shocked by their cruelty. I know they're bad people. Like, I get that even like the people that were donating money to him should not be donating money to a hateful.
Right, they're also bad people.
Despot. They're also bad people. But like, I just feel like, you know, if like people were taken in by this con, and it is like much more of a con than even they were knowing that they were a part of.
Yeah. Ugh. Yeah, it is. It's sad.
Bad for them in the sense that I feel like don't give money to Donald Trump, but I feel sort of just like sad by the sort of like level of cruelty that demonstrates to the very people who propped him up, who often, you know, who were like literally supporting insanity in order to keep this man in their lives. And the way that he repays them is to directly steal their money. And they are not rich people. In any case, I know that that's crazy because obviously what the Trump movement stands for is you know, you're giving money to a grifter and that's what it is. So like, whatever, but like, I don't know. It's just so mean.
I know. It is. Yeah.
And also, on a related note, this is why I don't donate to candidates that accept corporate money anymore either. Because I feel like they're basically stealing my money in an effort to represent corporations.
Yep.
And while this isn't exactly the same thing, it is too similar of a thing for me to not mention it right now.
Might be worse.
Right. And it might be why I'm taking this Trump grift so personally.
Yeah, it could be.
I just feel like this is the thing that I hate the most in politics.
Right.
And he just is doing it so openly.
Yeah, totally.
And listen, steal your rich friend's money to your heart's content. I mean, you guys can all trade money all you want, but not just regular people. No. They're just trying to be awful in their private lives out there. Just trying to do small acts of awfulness amongst themselves.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Oh man.
Terrible.
There's something interesting going on in Georgia right now.
Yeah.
I mean, there's an election going on in Georgia right now.
Right. So a lot of interesting things are happening there.
Right.
None of them being done by John Ossoff. Nothing interesting is happening in the sense that he is not running an interesting campaign.
Right. So one thing that's going on there is that the Democrats in Georgia are losing the ad wars because of some major spending by some GOP groups down there and big money donors, which is not surprising. The Ossoff and Warnock campaigns themselves are actually out fundraising, both Loeffler and Perdue, but some of the big money Democrats have sort of questioned whether they should actually be down there funding those campaigns because maybe being on the air is not the most important thing that they should be doing, and maybe some of the on the ground work with some of the nonprofits there who are actually driving voter turnout and doing the things that you would need to do to actually get people to show up might actually be more important than running a bunch of commercials. I'm
shocked. And the only reason I'm shocked is because I've apparently never read the news before, because this is very directly what you could attribute the wins of a ton of progressives all over the country to, is people like knocking on doors and like trying to actually ask for people's votes.
Yeah. I mean, look, they're never going to say that this is due to, the tweet storm of AOC after the election in the House, but it certainly is, because Politico is reporting that there's this is a quote from their article. It said, there's a growing suspicion among some Democratic donors grounded in the party's failure to flip control of the Senate in November that massive TV ad campaigns don't equal success, and money might be put to better use with organizations operating on the ground in Georgia instead of on the air.
I believe that is information we told you on this podcast weeks ago. Specifically in response to the Ossoff campaign, because that is one that was proven to not know what to do with all the money they had.
Yep.
But it is actually like get people to vote.
Yes.
That get people to vote.
And apparently the nonprofits are actually seeing this for real. Good. Because they've been getting a lot. Their donations have been either just as much or higher in many instances since the November election than they were leading up to the November election. So instead of just blindly sending money to John Ossoff, people are like, oh, maybe I should give to Fair Fight, or maybe I should give to New Georgia Project. Or
we had directed you to spread the vote when Kat Calvin came on the podcast. You can still donate to them. We had directed you to New Georgia Project as well, because that was an organization she spoke about while she was on the podcast. Like,
Yep.
there are plenty of organizations that you can donate to in Georgia that are actually like in the business of getting people the stuff they need to vote.
And those are harder to track in public data. So I'm fascinated by, look, the polls for this are close. Most polls have the Republicans up by a little bit, but I feel like that's actually what the latest presidential polls looked like in Georgia too. I mean, I know Biden thought maybe he could win there, but like, I think that if we already know that didn't they have like over 1 million people vote, like in the, either on the first day or within the first week or whatever
they had
it was.
Big
Like,
early
we're
voting.
having record turnout right there. So I will be curious to see, look, these are uphill elections, I think, even though Biden did win there. It was, very close. And
and both of these elections were on the ballot when especially with
and Ossoff lost
Purdue.
by much more than Trump did. I mean, he lost by I think over 100,000 votes, where Biden, won by 15 or 20,000 votes. So and that's because he's a terrible candidate for literally anything. But it'll be interesting to see whether this plan works. I think it will have worked even if it's just closer for Ossoff than it was.
Well, I was going to say,
considering this is a special election, which we classically have trouble getting people to vote.
Yeah. I think that there is, I have more hope for Warnock than I do for Ossoff, because I think that race has a little more room, A, because he's running against like a literal criminal, and B, because he's just like a much more compelling candidate. But I think it would be fascinating if they split the races, because they did in the presidential race showed them splitting the presidential and Senate races.
So Ossoff Purdue race, yeah.
I mean, and so I don't see why that's not a possibility, but I like that feels like an actual possible outcome here, which is fascinating.
Well, also nobody has been looking dumber on television than Kelly Loeffler.
A single person
in the last week, because she has been the one who is trying to like thread the needle on whether Trump did or didn't win the election. And the interviews that she did this week after the Electoral College voted were, I mean, look, it is hard to feel bad for Kelly Loeffler. But she fumbled through some interviews.
But Brent can historically find a way to feel bad for almost anyone. So I feel like.
But I mean, like, they were the type of, I don't like, the type of humor that is sort of like, the Borat style humor where it's just like makes you so uncomfortable that you can't watch. There were interviews this week with Kelly Loeffler, who I hate, that I just could not actually watch all of, that I like had to mute, because like the amount of fumbling that she was doing was making me uncomfortable, because she is
so embarrassing.
She's having a rough time of it right now, and people are not going to like that.
No.
From her, because she's doing the thing that people hate about politicians, right? And I think that her being a Trump supporter, especially, I think even Trump people probably are not going to like that, because like it's like the opposite of being a straight shooter. You know what I mean? Like
she's like an actual just like rich person who decided to be a rich person in politics. But her husband,
she got appointed because she was a rich person.
Yeah, her husband is the head of the Federal Reserve, which means, could she possibly actually live in Georgia?
Oh, I don't know.
Like, I don't think, like, she might be from Georgia or have spent some time in Georgia. They probably own property in Georgia because they have private jets. They might as well own property in Georgia. But like, I feel like one thing about her is that she like very openly couldn't possibly care about the plight of regular Georgians because of her not really being in Georgia. She's like not a person in Georgia. It's like if, it's like if Beyonce ran to be the senator from Georgia, and it's like maybe her heart would be in the right place, which in Kelly's case is not the case, but like she's not like a person from Georgia. So like she doesn't live in Georgia. She's not from there. She has nothing to do with Georgia. Like it sort of feels like it has that quality where it's just like a random rich person deciding that they are running on a platform of being rich. And like, because of that, she's having to answer political questions. She's not qualified to answer a political question. There's no what she thinks about politics. So, in any case,
she doesn't.
In final news, you guys, I don't know what the enduring appeal of Space Force is to Donald Trump or anyone. They are really, really proud of Space Force. And that is because it sounds like a thing from a movie. Yep. And they are working as hard as they can to make it even more of a thing from a movie. The logo was a Star Trek logo that they ripped off. And now they have announced in bold, bombastic tweets that they now know what the people who work for the Space Force will be known as. And the word that they chose was guardians, which is just them making a joke on themselves about Guardians of the Galaxy.
That's right.
And well, that wasn't even my favorite part of the graphic that they announced it with, because the graphic has heritage plus mission plus culture, which no one knows what that means.
Right,
Guardians.
heritage and culture? What?
Right? And then under Guardians is a name chosen by space professionals for space professionals. Space professionals to me sounds like a PC term for astronauts.
No.
As if astronauts was like too pejorative.
Yeah.
Or like NASA employees or what, like, I mean, there's space professionals? What the hell are we talking about?
Yeah, space professionals.
And which space professionals were part of the team that chose this name for space professionals?
I don't know.
And why would you put that on the logo?
I know. Also, does it look like there's a meteor hitting Earth in this?
Yes, it sure does.
In this graphic.
Yes, that is another thing that is happening in this graphic. The graphic is fascinating for so many reasons. There's like one random satellite, a meteor hitting Earth, a Star Trek logo. I can't imagine that anyone at any level of government, including the people in the space professionals that work for Space Force, like being able to take any of this seriously. Also, we're not going to pay for Space Force when this is done, right? I mean, this ends on January 20th.
I sure as hell hope so.
I mean, we can't be paying for the for Space Force.
No, we cannot.
That's not a thing. Like,
oh man, guys.
But the tweet is also brilliant. Also, did we know that there is another term for space professionals that is like something like space sailor or something that
oh yeah, what
replied to a tweet of mine with an incredibly humorless tweet about
like a star or something, wasn't it? Like
a star sailor.
Star sailor.
Star sailor is the breaking news.
They have a deal.
The deal has been reached. You heard it here first. Breaking news reported by Carla Nordstrom.
Carla Nordstrom herself.
The podcast.
Oh God, just in time.
Just in time for us to finish recording. What a world. In any case, we leave you, I guess, with breaking news, which we never get to do.
Yeah.
And also with the news that you can now refer to the members of Space Force as Guardians. So
Guardians.
2 pieces of important news for you on this evening. We will talk to you next week. Bye.
Oh, Merry Christmas if that's your thing.
Oh, and Merry Christmas. That's right. Or Happy Holidays if you are somebody who is participating in the war on Christmas, which my family certainly is. There was 1 year on Christmas to wish us a Merry Christmas, a holiday we are celebrating on Christmas, like many people that celebrate Christmas. And my mom replied with Happy Holidays. I was like, this is the one moment where it is okay to say Merry Christmas, Mom. So in any case, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays. We will talk to you next week. And then after that too.
Some point after that.
Bye.
Bye.